Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. My dad slid a folder across the kitchen table. The acceptance email on my phone was still open. I thought he was calling a celebration, not a trial. He rested his hand on the folder and just waited. My name is Alex and I am 23. I am writing this a few years after that night. Back then, I still believed my parents were my safety net. By the time I finished that conversation, I knew better. He cleared his throat once like he was starting a speech. My mom sat opposite me with her arms crossed tight. There was no cake or smile, just this official posture. He said we needed to talk about me living here. He flipped the folder open and turned it toward me. My full name sat at the top of a document. Under it there were boxes for dates and monthly amounts. I saw the word tenant printed where I knew my name went. I laughed because my brain grabbed the easiest explanation. I asked if this was some kind of joke contract. My voice came out lighter than I felt inside. Neither of them laughed, which hit harder than any words. My dad tapped the page with one finger, slow and firm. He said this was a lease for my room now. I stared at him, then at my mom, waiting for the twist. She kept her eyes down on the table like it might break. You start college in the fall, so you start paying rent. $400 each month, due on the 1st. His tone stayed calm, which somehow made it worse. I felt my shoulders pull up like I had just been shoved. I said I just got in, and we had not even celebrated. The whole point of living at home was saving money, right? My mouth moved faster than my thoughts, so the words came out messy. He folded his arms and waited for me to finish complaining. This is us preparing you, not punishing you, he told me. The world charges rent and the world does not care. Better you learn that here, where you are still supported. He sounded like a guidance counselor giving a speech about adulthood. My mom finally looked up and told me this would help later. She said I would get used to managing bills and schedules. Her voice shook a little, which almost made me back down. Almost, because my chest already burned like someone flipped a switch. I reminded them of every time they promised to support my education. I did the hard work and got in, and now they wanted payments. The word landlord flashed through my head and made my stomach twist. I asked if they were seriously charging their own kid to sleep here. My dad leaned forward and told me to stop acting entitled. He said I was almost an adult now, and adults pay where they live. If you want to feel like a grown-up, start with this. The phrase grown-up felt like a trap more than a compliment. I asked what happened if I refused to sign the lease. He did not raise his voice, which somehow scared me more. Then you find another place to stay before classes start, he answered. He said it like he was offering a menu choice, not kicking me out. I looked at the document and tried to picture another place. I had no dorm lined up yet and no savings anywhere. My best friend lived with her own parents and nobody else had room. Every path I imagined ended with me dragging bags to someone else's couch. I turned to my mom because she usually softened his strict ideas. She picked at a spot on the table and avoided my eyes. You can do this, we believe in you, she said finally. The words "we believe in you" landed like a weight instead of comfort. My hands shook when I picked up the pen from the table. I told myself this was temporary, a weird lesson that would pass. My name scratched across the line under tenant while my chest hammered. I signed every page he flipped toward me without really reading them. My dad stacked the pages neatly and slid them back into the folder. He nodded once like a business deal had just closed in his favor. My mom reached over and squeezed my wrist, then let go fast. "Thank you for understanding," she whispered, as if I had a choice. Looking back, that was the moment the house stopped feeling like mine. I became a tenant on paper and something smaller in my own head. They probably thought they were turning a key for my future. From my side, it felt more like a locked door I could not see past. I took my phone from the table and checked the acceptance email again. The words "congratulations on your admission" looked smaller than they had before. I walked to my room with the folder still in my head. College was finally real, but now it came with a monthly price tag. I laid a stack of bills on the counter and pulled my hand back fast. My dad drew them closer with one finger like he was dragging evidence. He straightened the pile, counted once in his head, then nodded. That was my first month's rent, and it hurt more than losing sleep. I had earned it that week racing between classes and a grocery job. The store manager had hired me on the spot after a quick interview. He glanced at my schedule, circled nights and weekends, and called it perfect. Perfect for him because it meant I would be there whenever no one else wanted to be. By the end of that first shift, my feet throbbed and my brain buzzed. Every beep, every impatient line, every forced smile piled up in my chest. I remember holding the slip with my hourly rate and doing rough math. I realized exactly how many hours would disappear each month just to stay in my own room. When the first paycheck landed, I did not celebrate, I calculated. I split the money on my bed, small piles for gas and books. The number for my parents sat in the middle like a dare. I stared at it for a long minute, then folded it tight and got up. In the kitchen, no one asked how work went, they already knew the ritual. My dad watched me place the folded bills near his coffee mug. He opened the stack and ran his thumb along the edges, counting silently. "Good on time," he said, and the approval sounded like a receipt stamp. My mom took a small notebook from the drawer and flipped it open. She wrote the date and the amount in neat little numbers, then paused. I caught my own name written on the top of the page, underlined twice. She closed the notebook quickly when she noticed my eyes on it and smiled too wide. In that moment, I told myself it was just tracking, nothing more. Plenty of parents kept lists for taxes or budgets or whatever adult thing. Still, something about seeing my name above a column of payments stung. It felt less like family and more like a file they kept on me. After that, the days blurred into a loop of lectures and barcode beeps. I would sprint from campus to the store, then home when the doors locked. Most nights I ate something quick standing up, then collapsed with my laptop. I kept telling myself this was temporary, but the calendar pages moved slow on purpose. Online, my friends posted pictures from their dorms, messy and loud and free. Group chats flooded with stories about annoying roommates and late-night pizza. I mostly read and dropped emojis because my stories involved price checks and rent. One night I finally snapped and typed, "I pay my parents to live at home." The chat went weirdly quiet for a few seconds, which never happened. Then one friend replied, "Wait, like actual monthly rent?" Another followed with, "That's harsh as hell, dude, are they serious?" I stared at the screen, felt my ears heat up, and typed back slower. I tried to play it off like some motivational experiment I was totally fine with. I said they wanted me ready for real life, so they made it real. It sounded almost reasonable written out, which made me hate it more. No one joked after that, they just dropped a few awkward reactions and changed topics. Later that week, one close friend called me late while walking back from a party. I could hear people laughing in the background, muffled music somewhere behind her. She asked in a low voice if my parents were having money problems. Because from the outside, charging your kid rent sounded like pure desperation. I told her they were fine, then I hesitated, then said they should be. I explained the contract in a rush, the rules, the threats, the whole thing. She swore under her breath and said, "That's not normal, you know that, right?" I laughed in this thin way and said, "It's just their version of tough love, I guess." After we hung up, I sat there in the dark listening to the house settle. I could hear my parents, TV through the wall, calm voices, canned laughter. They sounded relaxed, like nothing unusual was going on in our home. Meanwhile, I was rehearsing speeches in my head that I never actually gave. The second month came faster because that is how bills work. Instead of cash, I moved the amount through a banking app and watched it vanish. I screenshot the confirmation without really knowing why, just pure anxiety. It felt like proof that I was keeping my side of a deal I never wanted. In the kitchen, my mom still opened the notebook and added the new line. I leaned over just enough to see a long column of dates beneath my name. She curled her hand to block the rest and asked how classes were going. I answered with one safe word, "Fine," while my eyes stayed locked on that page. Once on my way past their room, I caught a glimpse of something different. My mom sat at the desk with the laptop open to a banking site. There was a label on one account that started with my first name. Before I could read the rest, she clicked away too fast and asked if I needed something. I said I was just passing through and pretended not to care at all. Inside my head, questions stacked up faster than I could even finish them. Was that account for college emergencies, some secret loan, or something else entirely? At that point, my money felt like it was dropping into a well I was not allowed to see. I know it sounds dramatic looking back, but the secrecy changed everything. If they sat me down and walked me through where it all went, I might have swallowed it. Instead, every new deposit turned into this quiet test of loyalty and trust. I paid on time and they logged it like evidence, and none of us said what that really meant. The weirdest part is that I kept defending them out loud whenever anyone questioned it. When coworkers griped about low pay, I tossed in jokes about building character at home. One girl stared at me and said, "Your folks sound intense, man, are you okay with that?" I shrugged and claimed it was motivating, then went to the back room and clenched my jaw until it hurt. Month after month, the pattern dug in until it felt almost normal. Work, class, transfer, notebook, all lined up like steps I could walk in my sleep. On the outside, I was the responsible kid who never missed a payment. Inside, every calendar reminder felt like a tap on the shoulder asking, "You sure you're not being played?" I did not realize it then, but those early months set the tone. Not just for our money routine, but for how much I trusted anything they told me. By the time midterms rolled around, the house did not feel like home or a rental. It felt like something in between, and I was stuck paying for the privilege of staying confused. The engine cut out as I tried to merge. Traffic rushed past while my foot hammered the useless gas pedal. I coasted to the shoulder and prayed the steering stayed alive. When the car finally trembled still, my hands stayed glued to the wheel. I felt exposed out there, like every passing driver could see exactly how broke I was. My phone buzzed with low battery while I stared at the dash. Warning lights blinked then faded, like they were giving up too. I called roadside assistance and stumbled through their questions, voice shaking hard. They told me a truck was on its way and to stay put. Easy for them to say, they were not sitting on a dead car payment. While I waited, I watched the clock crawl toward the end of my shift. I knew I was missing hours, and each one had a number attached. Rent, gas, textbooks, everything lined up in my head like hungry mouths. By the time the tow truck pulled up, I was already doing damage control math. The driver hooked the car without much talk, and I climbed into the passenger seat with my stomach in knots. At the repair shop, the guy in coveralls lifted the hood and frowned. He poked around, asked a few short questions, then walked me back to the counter. He wrote a number on a slip, turned it toward me, and tapped twice. The amount sat there between us like a dare I could not meet. I laughed once too sharp and asked if there was a cheaper option. He shrugged and said I could leave the car until I figured things out. Storage would cost me too, just at a slower drip. I nodded like I was considering something smart while my mind spun. Without that car, work became a question mark and rent followed behind it. I told him I would talk to my parents and call back with an answer I did not have. On the ride home with a friend who picked me up, I stayed quiet. He asked if I was okay, eyes flicking between me and the road. I muttered that my car needed more work than I had money. He whistled low and said, "That's brutal, man, maybe your folks can help." I stared out my window and felt my jaw clench so hard it hurt. By the time I walked through our front door, my clothes smelled like the repair shop. The house was calm, TV murmuring somewhere down the hall. I held the estimate slip in my fist, folded so tight it dug into my palm. My rent transfer for the month had already gone out 2 days earlier. I felt like I was about to ask investors for another loan they would enjoy judging. They were in the living room, shoes off, watching something light and easy. My mom looked over first and asked why I was home so late. My dad glanced at the clock, then at me, waiting for an explanation. I held up the crumpled paper like it was proof of a crime. "My car broke down today and I need help," I said, words tumbling out fast. My mom reached for the paper, smoothing it between her hands. Her eyes moved down the numbers, then widened just a little at the bottom. My dad leaned forward, elbows on his knees, attention locked on my face. "That's a big hit," he said. "You know repairs cost real money." I bit my tongue to keep from saying anything rude right away. I told them I could cover part of it if I cut everything extra. No eating out, no campus events, nothing that cost more than a bus fare. I said I could maybe manage half the bill if I skipped sleep and picked up shifts. Then I asked if they could spot the rest just this time. I hated how small my voice sounded on that last part. My dad leaned back and folded his arms across his chest. He asked why I thought they could just absorb that kind of surprise. We already carry the mortgage, utilities, everything else, you know. His tone stayed control D, which somehow made each word land harder. He looked at me like I had walked in with a luxury purchase, not a breakdown notice. I reminded them I was paying to stay there every month. I said I was doing everything they asked, working, keeping up with classes. If the car stayed dead, I might lose the job that made the rent possible. That money I hand over is supposed to keep me afloat, not sink me. My voice rose at the end, and I heard it crack in the quiet room. My mom rubbed her forehead and told me they could not rescue me from every hit. She said part of growing up was handling stuff like this without panic. I stared at her because panic felt pretty reasonable at that moment. She added that they had already helped a lot by letting me stay under their roof. That word "let" scratched at me, like I was lucky to be there at all. I laughed once, no humor in it, and asked if they were serious. I said, "You charge me rent and then act like hosting me is charity." I told them I was not asking for a sports car, just help keeping my beater alive. The room went heavy, the TV still running in the background like white noise. My dad's jaw tightened, and I realized I had hit something raw. He stood up slowly, which was somehow worse than shouting. "You wanted to be treated like an adult, remember," he said. "Adults manage their transportation, they adjust, they handle emergencies without expecting a bailout. We're showing you how the world works, not trying to hurt you." I felt my nails dig into my palms while he talked about reality like a lecture. I told him the world did not ask its tenants to also act like grateful children. I said it felt like they wanted both obedience and rent, and I was tired. My mom flinched at the word tired, like I had called her selfish instead. She asked if I really thought they were just using me for extra income. I did not answer right away, which somehow answered everything worse. My dad finally raised his voice and told me if I hated it so much, I could look for another place. He gestured toward the door like the option was right there for me. "No one is chaining you to this address," he added, eyes sharp. "If you find a better situation, take it, that's what grown people do." Something in my chest snapped at the way he threw that choice at me. I walked out of the room without another word and headed straight to my space. My backpack hit the floor, then I grabbed it again and started stuffing clothes inside. A few shirts, jeans, socks, whatever my hands touched went in without sorting. I yanked my phone charger from the wall and tossed it on top. For a minute, I really believed I was leaving that night. I sat on the edge of the bed with the bag at my feet. My phone lit up as I searched for shared housing in the area. Listings flashed past, each one with rent amounts higher than mine plus deposits. Half of them mentioned credit checks and references, things I did not have ready. Every option felt like a door with a price tag hanging from the handle. I clicked on one ad and did the math out loud, trying to make it work. If I took on another shift, maybe I could cover the baseline. Then I added groceries, bus passes, everything else that never stopped coming. The numbers crushed whatever impulse I had left to storm out. I turned the screen off and stared at my overstuffed bag like it was mocking me. A soft knock landed on my door once, then twice. I almost ignored it, then muttered, "Come in," without looking up. My mom stepped inside slowly, eyes going straight to the packed backpack. She asked where I thought I was going with that thing. Her voice trembled, but her shoulders stayed straight, which made me feel even more cornered. I told her I was checking my options, that was all. I said I needed to know I was not trapped in one arrangement forever. She sat down beside the bag and rested her hand on the zipper. "No one wants you trapped," she whispered, "we just want you prepared." I did not trust my voice enough to say how little that helped. She reached into the hall closet on her way out, searching for something. A binder slipped into view before she could pull it all the way inside. Across the cover, I caught a glimpse of my name printed in bold letters. Under it, I saw the first part of another word that looked like savings. Her hand snapped the door shut, and she turned back with a tight smile that did not match her eyes. "You should unpack," she said, "we can talk more later." Then she walked away, leaving me with a half-formed suspicion buzzing in my head. I stared at the closet door, replaying that single image of my name on the binder. My bag stayed closed on the floor, like it was waiting for the next decision. That night I slept in the same bed, but it did not feel like staying. It felt like pausing before something bigger snapped. My phone buzzed in my pocket while I waited in line. I checked it, saw my banking app notification, and felt my stomach drop. Rent withdrawn, again, on the morning I was supposed to walk for graduation. I slid the phone away and stared at the back of the gown in front of me. Everyone else looked nervous about tripping on stage. I was thinking about my balance. They handed me the fake diploma cover and told me to smile. I walked across the platform, shook a hand, faced the crowd. I spotted my parents in the stands, both waving like everything was perfect. For a second I waved back because muscle memory is stronger than resentment. Then that rent alert flashed in my head again, and the moment soured. After the ceremony, they rushed toward me with open arms and loud congratulations. My mom pulled me into a tight hug and whispered, "You did it." My dad clapped my shoulders so hard it almost knocked the cap off. They wanted photos from every angle, me holding the cover, grinning on command. I went along, but behind every smile I counted how much I had just paid them. Friends grabbed me for group shots, caps tilted, hands thrown in the air. Someone yelled about a party later, and phones came out to trade locations. I told them I was doing dinner with family first, then I might drop by. One of them joked, "Make your landlords pay for dessert at least." I laughed, but my eyes went straight to where my parents were waiting. In the car my dad drove, talking about how proud he was. He kept asking about job fairs and interviews like we were planning a business rollout. I stared out the window, fingers worrying the edge of the diploma cover. My mom turned in her seat and asked if I wanted to pick the restaurant. I said I did not care, as long as it was not crazy expensive. She glanced at my dad, then mentioned a place they had already booked. Her voice had this careful tone, like the decision had been rehearsed. I joked weakly that maybe I should treat them, since I now contributed monthly. They both chuckled, but the sound felt delayed, almost forced. That small pause told me something was brewing, even if I could not name it. The place they took me to was nicer than I expected. Reservations, cloth napkins, all the little signals that scream, "This will hit the card." I checked the menu and did the math out of habit, eyes tracking the cheapest things. My dad closed his and told me not to stress, they had it covered tonight. Hearing that almost annoyed me more, because I knew whose money padded their comfort. The waiter came, took drink orders, made a joke about graduation crowds. My mom asked for water, my dad ordered something stronger and winked at me. I picked soda because even in that moment I calculated cost in my head. When the waiter left, silence dropped for a second, heavy and obvious. They exchanged a look over the table that set every nerve in me on alert. "So what's the plan now?" my dad asked, elbows resting on the table. "Work full-time, more classes, maybe both." He watched my face like he already had an ideal answer in mind. I told him I had an internship lined up for the summer if it came through. He nodded, but there was something waiting behind his eyes, like this was just warm-up. My mom asked if I still intended to stay at home for a while. She asked it gently, but the question still hit a nerve. I said that for now I did not see another option that did not involve selling organs. I added that continuing to pay them every month did not exactly leave room to relocate. Her fingers curled around the edge of her napkin, twisting it without a word. Food arrived, plates set down, everyone thanked the waiter automatically. For a few minutes the conversation stayed light, surface level, about professors and campus drama. My parents laughed at the right spots, asked small questions, nodded along. It felt like we were all killing time until something dropped. I kept glancing at my mom's purse, convinced there was another contract hiding in there. Dessert menus came out, and the waiter listed options like a script. My dad told me to order whatever I wanted. Tonight was about celebrating. I picked something without tasting the words, my mind nowhere near the table. My mom declined dessert, which was my first real clue because she never did. She just folded her hands and stared at me with this intense mix of pride and worry. When the plates landed, she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. She placed it between us like it might explode if handled wrong. My name was written across the front, neat and careful. My throat tightened because the last time they gave me paperwork with my name, everything changed. My dad cleared his throat once, then rested his palm against the table beside it. "Go on, open it," he said, voice steadier than his eyes. I studied both of them, trying to read what I was about to step into. "Is this another agreement?" I asked, because I need to know before I touch it. My mom let out this half laugh, half breath, like she had been holding it in. "Nothing like that," she answered, "just open it, please." I slid a finger under the flap and pulled out a small stack of pages. The first sheet was a bank statement with my name at the top. My pulse spiked because for a second I thought it was a bill under my identity. Then I saw the balance figure, big and bold, and my brain stalled. I whispered the number out loud, more question than statement. It took a moment for the digits to line up as real. This was not $50 or a little graduation card money. It was months and months of paychecks pressed together into something solid. I flipped to the previous page and saw row after row of deposits. Every entry matched the exact rent I had been sending them to the dollar. "Is this a mistake?" I asked, fingers shaking against the paper. My dad leaned in, eyes locked on mine now, no joking left. "No, that account is yours," he said. "It has always been meant for you." My mom nodded quickly, almost too fast, like she needed me to believe it. "We have been putting what you give us in there since the beginning." For a second, I could not even respond because every late-night shift flashed through my head. Every transfer notification, every month they logged my payment in that little chart. I thought of the day my car died and how they backed away from helping. I thought of the arguments about responsibility and the speeches about adulthood. All while this account with my name sat quietly growing somewhere I could not see. "So you saved all of it?" I asked, not sure whether to whisper or yell. My hand pressed flat on the table, trying to ground me to something. My dad said they set up the account right after they made me sign the first document. He explained that every payment I sent went there and stayed there. Then he added we threw in extra when we could, just to give it a push. My mom reached across and tapped the line showing a recent contribution. "That one and that one, those are from us," she said softly. She did not sound smug, more like she was bracing for my reaction. "We wanted you to feel the pressure of regular obligations," she continued. "But we also wanted you to have a cushion when you stepped out on your own." I pulled my hand back and stared at both of them, anger and relief colliding. "So all those months you watched me stress and never told me this existed. You let me think you were pocketing my rent while I hustled to keep up. You watched me almost move out with a half-packed bag and still said nothing." My voice rose and a few people at nearby tables turned their heads. My dad lowered his tone, but there was steel under it. "If we told you up front, you would not have taken it as seriously. You would have treated it like a piggy bank, not a real obligation. The whole point was that the money had to feel gone, at least for a while. Adults do not assume anything is coming back, that was the lesson." I snapped that adults also expect transparency, especially from people who claim to love them. I told them it was not just about the cash, it was about trust. "You let me think you were choosing cash over helping when my car quit. You let me sit in my room and wonder if you were just greedy. You cannot act surprised that this messed with my head," I added. My mom's eyes filled and she looked down at the table, fingers twisting again. "We misjudged that part," she admitted. "We thought holding firm would toughen you. We did not realize how much you believed we were abandoning you. If I could rewind the night you packed that bag, I would." She glanced at my dad when she said it, which told me they had fought about that already. I asked if any of the account had ever been touched for their own bills. The question came out harsher than I meant, but I did not retract it. My dad shook his head once, quick and sharp, like the idea offended him. He told me the entire balance, plus what they added, belonged to me now. "We never used a cent," he said. "You can verify it if you want." I flipped through the pages again, scanning dates, trying to catch them in a lie. The deposits matched my transfer history, all the way back to the first month. There were no withdrawals, just a slow climb upward with little bumps from interest. Looking at that climb, I felt something ugly and grateful at the same time. They had turned my resentment into a savings I never would have built alone. My dad pushed a small plastic card across the table, edges still stiff. "This links to that account," he said, careful with each word. "Use it for your place, for when you move, for the transition. We want you to start adult life with some breathing room, not empty pockets. It's your money, though, you decide how to use it." I stared at the card like it might burn through my fingers. I thought about security deposits, first month's rent, maybe even a cheap couch. I also thought about every moment I had bitten my tongue to keep the peace. All those times they told Fr. Eanes it was just their strange way of teaching responsibility. I had been defending them without having the whole picture, and that stung. My mom reached over and wrapped her hand around my wrist, light but insistent. "We did not do this to hurt you," she whispered. "We really believed it would help. We grew up with nothing stored, nothing saved, always one surprise from disaster. We were terrified you would walk into life thinking it was all safety nets. So we tried to build one without you seeing the ropes." I believed her fear, even as I stayed furious about the method. That is the messed up part, how both things sat there together. Part of me wanted to say thank you for the account and the added funds. Another part wanted to shove the envelope back and tell them to keep it. Because suddenly their lessons looked less like survival and more like control with a bow on top. The waiter drifted by to ask if everything tasted okay, eyes flicking to the papers. My dad closed the folder quickly and smiled up at him, too bright. "Everything's great," he replied, "just finishing up, thanks." Once the waiter left, the space between us filled again with unspoken things. I tucked the envelope back into its cover, hands still trembling slightly. I did not give them a clear reaction that night, and honestly I still have not. I muttered something about needing time to process, because that was the only honest thing. My dad accepted it with a short nod and signaled for the check. My mom kept watching me like she wanted to hug me and apologize for everything at once. None of us knew how to do that without reopening every old argument on the spot. On the drive home, the envelope rested on my lap, heavier than it looked. My parents talked about future plans again, but their voices felt cautious now. They suggested I could use the account as a launch pad, get my own place soon. Part of me brightened at that, the idea of my name on a lease that was actually mine. Another part whispered, "And what will this change about how you see them?" When we pulled into the driveway, my dad turned off the engine and faced me. "Just so you know," he said, "we are proud of how you handled everything, even when you were angry." He added that he would understand if I stayed upset for a while. We did what we thought was right, but we know it did not always feel that way. That admission, quiet and late, hit almost harder than the account balance. In my room that night, I laid the statement on my bed and stared at it. The numbers looked solid, almost unreal, like they belonged to another person. I thought about how this money could finally open a door that had stayed shut. I also thought about the years I spent believing my parents valued income over my stress. Graduation day was supposed to be about closing one chapter, but all I could feel was a new kind of complicated beginning. The key jammed the first time I tried my apartment door. I twisted harder until it gave and stumbled into the empty space. Boxes leaned against the wall, and the lease sat on the counter. My name alone filled the top line, no parents anywhere nearby. I dropped my bag on the floor and stood there listening for whatever came next. Moving in felt less like freedom and more like a controlled test. That account from dinner had covered first month plus deposit and some basics. Now the balance sat lower on my screen, still big but not invincible. I watched the numbers blink, thinking about every late shift that built them. This place existed because of that history and because of a lie wrapped as a favor. Earlier that morning, my parents had carried boxes up the stairs. My dad handled the heavier stuff, my mom fussed over where things belonged. They kept making small comments about independence, like they were auditioning for supportive parents. My mom mentioned it was a nice area with lots of young people starting out and disappearing fast. My dad joked about finally regaining their quiet house, then glanced at me to see if I laughed. I did not laugh, I just adjusted my grip on a box. Every time they called this move a win, I heard something else underneath. You get your space and we get ours with no more rent arguments. People would call it fair on paper, but I still carried the weight of how we got here. If they noticed I went quiet, they filed it under stress and kept lifting. When they finally left, my mom hugged me twice at the door. "Call if anything feels off," she said with her voice unsteady in a way she tried to hide. My dad handed me a small envelope with receipts and another printed statement for the account. "That includes the last transfer he mentioned, the one that went through during your ceremony." He stepped back and looked around the apartment once, then told me I would do fine here. After the door shut, I locked it and leaned my head against the wood. Silence hit me harder than any comment they had made. There was no TVT. Rough the wall and no footsteps in the hallway, just my breathing and the fridge cycling on and off. I pulled my phone out and opened our family thread, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I typed "thank you for saving the money," then stared at the blinking cursor and added nothing else. I deleted the whole line and started again, this time more honest. I wrote that I appreciate the account, but I am still hurt. Staring at those words felt like standing on a ledge. In the end, I erased half of it and left only "thanks again, love you." I hit send with my teeth pressed together and my shoulders tight. The first time my new landlord texted about rent, my chest still tightened. I sent the payment from my own account, no detour through anyone else. Watching the confirmation pop up felt weirdly cleaner, like at least this arrangement was honest. No secret savings, no hidden ledger with my name written at the top. If this place ever screwed me over, it would not pretend the hurt was a lesson. A few weeks later, I drove back to their house for dinner. Pulling into the driveway, I realized it no longer felt automatic. I knocked instead of walking in, and that small detail rattled me. My mom answered fast and pulled me into a hug, then stepped back like she was checking for cracks. Behind her, my old room door stood half open, and I could already feel there was something different inside. I walked down the hall and pushed the door wider with my foot. The bed was still there, but the posters were gone and the desk cleared. A folded blanket sat where my old laundry mountain used to live. My mom called from behind me that the guest room was ready, and her voice tried to sound casual. In one visit, I had gone from daily resident to occasional visitor, and the speed of that shift stung. At dinner, my dad asked how the new place was treating me. I told him about a leaking faucet and the loud couple upstairs. He laughed and called it classic starter housing, then asked if I was using the account wisely. That word "wisely" made my brain flash back to every debate we had ever had. I answered that I was tracking every dollar, but I did not offer how much resentment still sat on the same spreadsheet. After we ate, my mom pulled me aside while my dad cleared dishes. She asked if I slept any better now that the money was under my control. I told her some nights were easier and some were not, and that was the closest I came to admitting anything. She apologized again for how they handled things in a quieter way this time, without speeches or defenses. I nodded and accepted it on the surface and tried not to think about all the conversations we might need later. Back in my apartment that night, I opened my laptop and logged into Reddit. I ended up on a relationship forum, then one of those moral judgment ones. The titles all sounded like mine, people arguing with strangers about family decisions. My cursor blinked in the post box while I tried to pick a headline. I typed "parents build me rent," then returned it after graduation, and I still cannot decide if that was caring or cruel. I filled in the details month after month and how they made me sign, and later showed the account at dinner. I tried not to sound dramatic, but leaving pieces out felt dishonest. I wrote about almost moving out and the bag on the floor and seeing my name on that binder. I included the part where they refused to help with repairs while the savings quietly grew. I ended with the restaurant envelope and my hand shaking around the bank statement and the card they slid across the table. Before posting, I read it from top to bottom and tried to imagine their faces if they ever found it. Part of me wanted strangers to call them monsters so I could feel justified. Another part wanted someone to say they tried and they just messed up the execution. If the comments came back split, maybe that would fit the truth best. Because honestly, this feels like a victory that still hurts to think about. I hovered over the submit button for a long count, breathing way too fast for someone sitting on a couch. Somewhere in town, my parents probably watched a show and assumed we were finally on steady ground. In my inbox, their last message still sat there with a simple heart and the words "you'll understand when you have kids." My cursor drifted back to the post and I added one last line, then pressed submit. I typed that I care about them and I have this money, but I still feel like an experiment.